If you love emotional stories about second chances, betrayal, and unexpected success, subscribe to the channel right now, and stay until the end, because the final decision this single father makes will change everything. At 6:17 p.m., Daniel Carter stood inside the largest office in the company, staring at a piece of paper that had just changed his entire month. His annual performance bonus had been cut in half. Not because he had failed. Not because he had missed deadlines. Not because his work had cost the company money. Quite the opposite. Daniel had spent the entire year solving problems that other people had created. He had stayed late when projects collapsed. He had answered calls on weekends. He had covered for sick coworkers. And more than once, he had saved major accounts that were seconds away from walking away. But now, his CEO, Victoria Reynolds, sat behind a massive glass desk and looked at him as if none of that mattered. "I'm sorry, Daniel," she said without sounding sorry at all. "The company has to make difficult decisions." Daniel looked down at the paper again. Half. That was what remained of the bonus he had been counting on. He slowly raised his eyes. "Ms. Reynolds, may I ask why?" Victoria leaned back in her chair. "Because your department exceeded its budget." Daniel swallowed. "With respect, ma'am, the department exceeded its budget because we completed 3 emergency projects. All 3 were delivered ahead of schedule." "I'm aware. And the clients renewed their contracts." "I'm aware of that too." Daniel hesitated. "Then I don't understand." Victoria sighed as though he had become an inconvenience. "You're a good employee, Daniel. But being a good employee doesn't mean the company owes you everything you expect." Those words hurt more than Daniel wanted to admit. He thought about the envelope sitting on his kitchen counter. His daughter Emily had been accepted into a better school. The enrollment deadline was next week. The bonus was supposed to cover the initial payment. Daniel had already promised her. And a single father learns very quickly that children remember promises. Daniel looked at the document one last time. "Understood." Victoria nodded. "Good." He picked up the paper. Then he stood. He wanted to say something. He wanted to remind her that 6 months earlier, she had personally thanked him for saving the Westbridge account. He wanted to tell her that when the company had needed someone to work through an entire weekend, he had been there. He wanted to tell her that while executives discussed profits in comfortable offices, people like him were the ones answering angry client calls at midnight. But Daniel said nothing. Because sometimes dignity means knowing when not to argue. He turned toward the door. "Thank you for your time." Victoria had already returned to her computer. Daniel walked out. The door closed behind him. And neither of them knew that before Daniel reached the elevator, his entire career was about to change. Daniel walked through the hallway carrying the document in one hand and his briefcase in the other. The office was almost empty. Most employees had already gone home. He passed rows of desks, meeting rooms, and glass walls reflecting the lights of the city. For years, this building had represented security to him. A salary. Health insurance. A future for Emily. Now, for the first time, it felt like a place he had outgrown without realizing it. His phone vibrated. A message from Emily. "Dad, are you coming home soon?" Daniel stopped. He stared at the message. Then he typed. "Soon, sweetheart." He almost added, "I have good news." But he deleted those words. He couldn't lie to her. Daniel put the phone away and continued walking. When he reached the elevator, he pressed the button. The doors opened. He was about to step inside when a man's voice came from behind him. "Daniel Carter?" Daniel froze. He turned around. Standing several feet away was Alexander Grant. Alexander was one of the most powerful businessmen in the city. He owned Grant Industries, one of the fastest-growing companies in the country. And more importantly, he was Victoria Reynolds's biggest business rival. Daniel had seen him on magazine covers. He had seen his company competing against theirs. He had even attended meetings where Victoria warned senior executives never to underestimate Alexander Grant. Now Alexander was standing in the hallway looking directly at him. "You're Daniel Carter, aren't you?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes." Alexander glanced at the document in Daniel's hand. "Did Victoria just cut your bonus?" Daniel's expression changed. "How did you know?" Alexander smiled slightly. "Because I know Victoria." He took a few steps closer. "I've also been watching your work." Daniel looked confused. "My work?" "For almost a year." Daniel didn't know what to say. Alexander continued. "You were the person who rescued the Miller account." Daniel nodded. "Yes. You were also the person who redesigned the logistics system after the software failure." "Yes. And you negotiated the emergency supplier contract when everyone else said it couldn't be done." Daniel looked at him carefully. "That was part of my job." Alexander shook his head. "No. That's what you tell yourself." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. Then he handed it to Daniel. "I want you to work for me." Daniel stared at the card. Alexander continued. "Senior Operations Director." Daniel looked up. "I'm sorry." "Double your current salary. Full performance bonus. Better benefits. And you'll report directly to me." Daniel couldn't move. For a few seconds, the hallway became completely silent. "You're serious?" "Very." Daniel looked toward the elevator. Then he looked back at Alexander. "Why me?" Alexander's answer was simple. "Because I don't hire people based on their title. I hire people based on what they can do." Daniel looked down at the business card. His hands were trembling slightly. A few minutes earlier, he had felt like a man who had lost half of his future. Now someone was offering him more future than he had imagined. But there was one problem. Daniel had spent years believing that loyalty mattered. He had believed that if you worked hard, kept your word, and stayed honest, eventually someone would recognize it. Maybe tonight was the first time he realized something different. Sometimes the right door opens only after the wrong one closes. Daniel looked at Alexander. "I need to think about it." Alexander nodded. "I expected you would." He turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing." Daniel looked back. "You don't owe Victoria your future." Then Alexander walked away. Daniel stood there alone. The elevator doors slowly closed. But he didn't enter. For the first time that evening, Daniel smiled. Not because his problems were solved, but because he finally saw a possibility. He went home that night later than usual. Emily was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. She looked up when he entered. "Dad." Daniel smiled. "Hey, kiddo." She immediately noticed something was wrong. "You're quiet." Daniel placed his briefcase down. "Long day." Emily studied him. "Did something happen?" Daniel sat beside her. He looked at the school brochure sitting on the table. Then at his daughter. "I need to tell you something." Emily became serious. Daniel explained what happened. He told her about the bonus. He told her he might not be able to make the payment. Emily was quiet. Then she smiled. "That's okay, Dad." Daniel looked at her. "What? We don't have to go to that school." He shook his head. "No. I promised you. You already gave me everything I need." Daniel felt his eyes becoming wet. Emily continued. "You work so hard. I don't want you worrying about me. Daniel pulled her into a hug. You're the reason I worry. She laughed softly. And you're the reason I'm proud. That sentence broke something inside him. Daniel hugged his daughter tighter. That night, after Emily went to bed, Daniel sat alone at the kitchen table. He looked at Alexander's business card. He looked at the school brochure. Then he looked at an old photograph of himself and Emily. For years, he had been surviving. Maybe it was time to start living. The next morning, Daniel arrived at work early. Victoria was already in her office. Daniel knocked. Come in. He entered. Victoria looked up. What is it? Daniel placed an envelope on her desk. She opened it. Inside was his resignation letter. Victoria stared at it. You're resigning? Yes. She leaned back. Where are you going? Daniel hesitated. Grant Industries. For the first time, Victoria's expression changed. Alexander hired you? Daniel nodded. Victoria stood. You can't be serious. I am. You're going to work for our biggest competitor? Daniel looked at her calmly. He offered me an opportunity. Victoria's voice became sharper. Daniel, don't make an emotional decision. Daniel almost smiled. I'm not. He paused. For the first time, I'm making a decision based on my future. Victoria looked at him. Then she looked at his resignation letter again. You'll regret this. Daniel nodded politely. Maybe. He picked up his briefcase. But I don't think I will. He turned toward the door. Victoria called after him. Daniel. He stopped. She looked at him for a long moment. Was the bonus really that important? Daniel turned around. It wasn't about the bonus. Victoria frowned. Then what was it about? Daniel answered quietly. It was about realizing that after everything I gave this company, you still thought I was replaceable. He walked out. This time, he didn't look back. Over the next few weeks, Daniel worked harder than ever. But something was different. At Grant Industries, people listened to him. When Daniel suggested a change, Alexander asked why. When Daniel presented a solution, Alexander didn't dismiss it. And when Daniel made a mistake, Alexander didn't humiliate him. He taught him. Within 3 months, Daniel transformed one of the company's struggling divisions. Within 6 months, profits increased dramatically. Within 9 months, Daniel was leading some of Alexander's most important projects. Meanwhile, Victoria's company began facing problems. The team Daniel had left behind struggled to maintain several systems only he fully understood. Clients started asking questions. Deadlines were missed. One major account threatened to leave. Victoria refused to believe the problem was connected to Daniel. Until one afternoon, she received a report. Revenue was falling. Customer complaints were increasing. Employee turnover was rising. Victoria stared at the numbers. Then she saw Daniel's old performance reports. She read them again. And again. She discovered something she had never bothered to notice. Daniel had personally solved 27 major operational problems during his time at the company. 27. And now he was gone. Victoria leaned back in her chair. For the first time, she understood. She hadn't cut the bonus of an average employee. She had pushed away one of the most valuable people in her organization. And she had done it over an amount of money that suddenly seemed insignificant. Months later, Daniel was invited to speak at a major business conference. He stood on a stage in front of hundreds of executives. Alexander introduced him. This man understands something many leaders forget, Alexander said. People aren't numbers. Daniel stepped forward. He looked at the crowd. Then he began speaking. Years ago, I thought success meant working hard enough that someone would eventually recognize you. The room became quiet. I was wrong. He paused. Success is also knowing your value when someone else refuses to see it. Daniel looked toward Alexander. Sometimes losing an opportunity is actually the beginning of finding the right one. The audience applauded. In the back of the room, Victoria was watching. She had come expecting to see the employee she once managed. Instead, she saw the leader he had become. After the presentation, Victoria approached him. Daniel. He turned. Victoria. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, she said, I owe you an apology. Daniel listened. I treated you like a number, she continued. I thought cutting your bonus was a financial decision. I didn't realize I was telling you what I thought you were worth. Daniel looked at her. People aren't always good at recognizing value when it's standing right in front of them. Victoria nodded. I know. She looked toward Alexander. He was right about you. Daniel smiled. Maybe he was. Victoria extended her hand. Daniel shook it. There was no anger. No revenge. Just closure. Later that evening, Daniel returned home. Emily ran toward him. How was the conference? Daniel smiled. Good. Did you win? He laughed. I think so. She hugged him. Daniel looked around their small home. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't a penthouse. But it was home. The place where he had struggled. The place where he had worried. The place where his daughter had reminded him that his worth wasn't determined by a paycheck. Daniel sat down beside her. You know something? What? Sometimes people will tell you that you're not good enough. Emily smiled. And? Daniel smiled back. You don't have to believe them. He looked at his daughter. Just keep becoming the person you know you can be. Emily hugged him again. Daniel closed his eyes. He remembered the elevator. The document. The humiliation. And then Alexander's voice. You don't owe Victoria your future. Daniel realized something that night. The bonus had been cut in half. But his life hadn't. His confidence hadn't. His dreams hadn't. And his future certainly hadn't. Sometimes life closes a door in the most painful way possible. You stand there wondering why. You think you've lost something. You think you're being punished. But sometimes that closed door is simply making room for another one. A better one. A door that leads somewhere you never imagined. Daniel didn't become successful because Victoria hurt him. He became successful because he refused to let that moment define him. And that's the lesson. Never let someone else's opinion become the limit of your potential. If someone doesn't recognize your value, don't spend your entire life begging them to see it. Keep learning. Keep working. Keep believing. And when the right opportunity appears, have the courage to walk through the door. Because sometimes the moment you think you've been rejected is actually the moment your real story begins. If this story touched your heart, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more emotional stories about courage, family, second chances, and unexpected success. And remember, you may lose a position, a paycheck, or even someone's approval, but never lose your belief in your own worth.